The pregnancy test slipped from Beverly's trembling fingers and clattered against the cold marble floor of the penthouse bathroom. 2 pink lines. Positive. She was carrying the child of a man who had made it painfully clear from their wedding night that she was nothing more than a vessel, a means to an end, a sacrifice on the altar of his love for another woman. She pressed her hand against her still flat stomach and caught her reflection in the mirror. The diamond wedding ring on her finger caught the light, mocking her with its brilliance. 3 months ago, she had been a struggling English teacher in Seoul, working double shifts at a convenience store just to pay rent. Now she was Mrs. Kang Jae-won, wife of the most powerful mafia boss in South Korea, pregnant with his heir, and completely, devastatingly alone. The bathroom door swung open, and there he stood. Kang Jae-won. 6 feet 2 inches of cold, calculated power wrapped in a tailored black suit. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, his eyes dark as midnight and twice as unforgiving. He looked at the pregnancy test on the floor, then at her face, and for a split second, something flickered in those merciless eyes. Something that almost looked like guilt. Almost. It worked, he said, his voice flat. Good. Now Soo-jin can finally get her surgery. Beverly felt her heart shatter into 1,000 pieces, each shard cutting deeper than the last. She had known this was a business arrangement. She had known he loved another woman. But hearing him reduce their unborn child to nothing more than a successful transaction made her want to scream. "That's all you have to say," she whispered. He straightened his cufflinks without looking at her. "What else is there to say? You knew the terms when you signed the contract. You'll be compensated generously, and once the child is born, you're free to go." Free to go. As if she hadn't spent the last 3 months sharing his bed, learning the rhythm of his breathing, memorizing the way he said her name in the darkness when he thought she was asleep. As if she hadn't foolishly, stupidly, begun to fall in love with a man who would never love her back. But Beverly had grown up on the south side of Chicago. She had buried her mother at 16, worked 3 jobs to put herself through college, and moved across the world with nothing but $200 and a dream. She was not the kind of woman who crumbled. She was the kind of woman who survived. So she lifted her chin, met his cold gaze with fire in her eyes, and said the words that would change everything. "And what if I don't want to go? If you're new here, welcome to the family. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and drop a comment below telling me what you think is going to happen next. Trust me, you don't want to miss where this story is going." 8 months earlier, Beverly Johnson had been standing in the rain outside a Seoul convenience store, counting the one in her hand and realizing she was $50,000 short for rent. The English academy where she worked had gone bankrupt without warning, leaving her and 12 other foreign teachers without their last month's salary. Her visa was tied to that job, which meant she had 30 days to find new employment or be deported back to a country where she had nothing and no one waiting for her. The rain soaked through her thin jacket as she walked toward the bus stop, her mind racing through increasingly desperate options. She could try to find another teaching job, but the visa transfer process took months. She could work illegally, but the penalties for that were severe. She could call her aunt in Chicago, but the last time they had spoken, her aunt had made it clear that Beverly was on her own. She was so lost in thought that she didn't see the black Mercedes until it was too late. It came around the corner too fast, hydroplaning on the wet pavement, and headed straight for her. Beverly's body moved on pure instinct. She dove out of the way, crashing hard onto the sidewalk, her palms scraping against concrete and her ankle twisting at an unnatural angle. The Mercedes screeched to a stop. The back door flew open, and a man emerged into the rain. He was tall, impossibly handsome, with the kind of face that belonged on magazine covers and the kind of presence that made the air feel thinner. He wore a suit that cost more than her annual salary, and when he knelt beside her, she caught the scent of something expensive and masculine. "Are you hurt?" His voice was deep, authoritative, accented in a way that suggested expensive international education. "My ankle," Beverly managed, trying to sit up. "I think I twisted it." He barked orders in rapid Korean to his driver, then turned back to her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I'm taking you to the hospital. Don't argue." "I can't afford a hospital," she said without thinking, then immediately wished she could take the words back. Nothing like advertising your poverty to a complete stranger. Something shifted in his expression. He looked at her tattered jacket, her worn shoes, the desperate exhaustion written across her beautiful features, and made a decision that would alter both of their destinies. I'll pay for everything. It's the least I can do. That should have been the end of it. A car accident, a hospital visit, a generous settlement from a rich man with a guilty conscience. Beverly would later wonder if fate had been laughing at her naivety. She spent 3 hours in the emergency room, getting her ankle wrapped and her palms bandaged. Through it all, the mysterious man stayed by her side, making calls in hushed Korean, his expression growing increasingly troubled. When the doctor finally discharged her, he was waiting with an offer she never could have anticipated. I have a proposition for you, he said, leaning against his Mercedes while his driver held an umbrella over them both. Beverly eyed him warily. What kind of proposition? The kind that could solve all your problems. He reached into his jacket and produced a business card. The name on it made her blood run cold. Kang Jae-won. Even she, a foreigner with limited knowledge of Korean society, had heard whispers about the Kang family. They ran the largest criminal empire in Asia, with fingers in everything from real estate to gambling to international trade. I need a wife, he continued, watching her face carefully. A temporary wife. Someone who can give me an heir within a year. In exchange, I will pay off all your debts, provide you with a new visa, and give you $10 million when the contract is complete. Beverly stared at him as if he had grown a second head. Are you insane? Possibly, he admitted with a humorless smile. But I'm also desperate. My grandfather is dying, and he's made it clear that I will not inherit control of the family business unless I produce an heir. Someone of my choosing has been deemed unsuitable. So I need to marry someone else, have a child, and then divorce once my inheritance is secured. And why me? You could have any woman in Korea. Because you're a foreigner with no connections to any rival families. Because you're beautiful enough that no one will question my attraction to you. And because you're desperate enough to consider saying yes. He was right about that last part, and they both knew it. Beverly looked down at his business card, then back at his impossibly handsome face, and felt the weight of her impossible situation pressing down on her shoulders. What about the woman you love? The one your grandfather deems unsuitable? For the first time, emotion cracked through his cold exterior. Her name is Yoon Soo-jin. We've been together for 5 years, but my grandfather refuses to accept her because her family has connections to a rival organization. She needs a surgery that costs millions, and my grandfather is blocking my access to the family funds as leverage. If I marry you, produce an heir, I get the inheritance. Soo-jin gets her surgery. Everyone wins. Except me, Beverly said quietly. I'm just the vessel. He had the decency to look uncomfortable. You'll be compensated. Generously. And I won't pretend there's any romance involved. This is a business arrangement, nothing more. She should have said no. She should have walked away from this cruel, beautiful man and his insane proposition. But desperation has a way of making the impossible seem reasonable, and so Beverly found herself asking the question that would seal her fate. When do we start? The wedding was a spectacle. 500 guests, most of whom had never heard of Beverly Johnson until that moment, gathered in the grand ballroom of the Kang family's hotel to witness the union of their crown prince to a mysterious American woman. The rumors flew fast and furious. She was a model. She was a celebrity. She was a spy sent by a rival family. None of them guessed the truth, that she was simply a poor girl from Chicago who had made a deal with the devil. Beverly wore white because Jae-won insisted on maintaining appearances, but she felt like she was wearing a shroud. The dress cost more than she had made in her entire life, and it felt like a costume. She walked down the aisle toward a man who wouldn't meet her eyes, surrounded by people who would never accept her, carrying the weight of a bargain that felt more damning with each step. When they exchanged vows, Jae-won's voice was steady and emotionless. When they kissed to seal the ceremony, his lips barely brushed against hers. And when they posed for photographs, his hand on her waist felt like a brand of ownership rather than affection. The wedding night was clinical. Jae-won came to her bedroom in the penthouse, his expression unreadable, and spoke words that still haunted her months later. We need to consummate the marriage. Produce an heir. Nothing more. Beverly had prepared herself for coldness, but she hadn't prepared for the way her traitorous body responded to his touch. He was clinical, yes, but he was also beautiful and skilled and surprisingly gentle. When he entered her, she gasped, and something like surprise flickered across his face. When it was over, he withdrew immediately, returning to his own bedroom without a word. But he came back the next night. And the night after that. And slowly, imperceptibly, the clinical encounters began to change. He started staying longer. He started looking at her when they made love instead of through her. He started saying her name in ways that made her heart stutter. And Beverly, against every ounce of self-preservation she possessed, began to fall in love with her husband. The first 3 months of their marriage were a study in contradictions. In public, Jaewon was the perfect husband. He held her hand at events, introduced her to business associates with pride in his voice, and looked at her with convincing adoration. In private, he maintained a careful distance, retreating to his study for hours, taking mysterious phone calls that left him looking troubled and sad. Beverly knew those calls were from Soo-jin. She had seen the name flash across his phone screen more than once, and each time, a little piece of her hope withered and died. But there were moments. Small, precious moments that made her believe there might be something real growing between them. The night he came home injured from a business meeting and let her clean his wounds, his fingers trembling slightly against her wrist. The morning she woke up to find him watching her sleep, an expression on his face that she couldn't quite name. The evening he laughed at something she said, a genuine laugh that transformed his severe features into something breathtakingly beautiful. Those moments were enough to keep her hoping, even when hope felt like a knife in her chest. The pregnancy test changed everything. After Jaewon walked out of the bathroom that morning, dismissing her and their child with 3 cold sentences, Beverly spent hours crying. Then she dried her tears, packed a small bag, and did something she had never done before in her marriage. She fought back. She found him in his study, on the phone with someone who made him smile in a way he never smiled at her. He hung up quickly when she entered, guilt flashing across his features before he could hide it. "We need to talk," she said. "There's nothing to talk about." "There's everything to talk about." She crossed the room and stood before his desk, forcing him to look at her. "I'm pregnant with your child. Your heir. The reason you married me in the first place. And you can't even pretend to be happy about it?" "Happy?" He laughed bitterly. "This isn't about happiness. This is about obligation. I did what I had to do for the woman I love, and you knew that from the beginning." "The woman you love," Beverly repeated, each word tasting like poison. "Yoon Soo-jin. The woman who needs millions of dollars for surgery. Tell me, Jaewon, what exactly is wrong with her?" Something flickered in his eyes. Hesitation. Doubt. "She has a rare heart condition. The only specialists who can perform the surgery are in Switzerland." "And you've seen her medical records?" "Of course I have." But his voice lacked conviction, and they both heard it. Beverly leaned forward, planting her hands on his desk. "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to really listen. Something about this doesn't add up. A man as powerful as you, with resources most people can only dream of, and you couldn't find another way to get money for your girlfriend's surgery? You had to marry a stranger and get her pregnant? Either you're not as powerful as everyone thinks, or there's something you're not seeing." Jaewon's face hardened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Maybe not. But I know desperation when I see it, and you've been desperate since the day we met. The question is whether you're desperate because you love her, or because she's made you believe you have to be." She walked out before he could respond, but she saw the seed of doubt she had planted take root in his eyes. "If you're still here, I need you to do me a favor. Drop a like on this video, leave a comment telling me if you trust Soo-jin, and share this with someone who loves a good drama. Now let's get back to the story because it's about to get intense." 3 weeks after their confrontation, Beverly began to notice things. Strange things. Things that didn't fit the narrative Jaewon had built around his tragic love story. It started with a phone call. Jaewon had left his personal phone in the living room while he showered, and when it rang, Beverly glanced at the screen automatically. The name, Soo-jin, flashed bright, but underneath it was something that made her heart stop. An incoming video call. Before she could think better of it, she answered. The face that appeared on the screen was beautiful. Delicate features, flawless skin, perfectly styled hair. Yoon Soo-jin looked nothing like a woman dying of a rare heart condition. She looked healthy, vibrant, and absolutely furious at seeing Beverly's face. "Who are you?" Soo-jin demanded. "Why do you have Jaewon's phone?" "I'm his wife," Beverly said calmly, even as her heart raced. "We live together. Why wouldn't I have access to his phone?" Something ugly flashed across Soo-jin's perfect features. "His wife is a temporary arrangement. A placeholder. Don't get comfortable, because the moment I have what I need, you'll be discarded like the charity case you are." "What exactly do you need?" Beverly asked. "Because I've been hearing a lot about surgeries and medical conditions, but you look remarkably healthy for someone who's supposed to be dying." Soo-jin's face went pale. For a moment, her mask of superiority slipped, revealing something desperate and calculating underneath. Then she recovered, her smile returning sharper than before. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, little girl. Jaewon belongs to me. He has always belonged to me. And when this is over, I will personally make sure you regret ever crossing my path." The call ended. Beverly stood frozen, her mind racing through everything she had just witnessed. Soo-jin's healthy appearance. Her slip about having what she needed. Her threat. None of it matched the narrative of a dying woman in need of saving. Something was very, very wrong. Over the next few weeks, Beverly began to investigate. It wasn't easy. She was pregnant, exhausted, and living in a house full of staff loyal to her husband. But she was also intelligent, resourceful, and motivated by something more powerful than curiosity. She was motivated by the instinct to protect her child. She started by befriending the household staff. Mrs. Kim, the head housekeeper, had been with the Kang family for 30 years and knew more secrets than anyone. At first, she was wary of the foreign bride, but Beverly's genuine kindness and interest in learning Korean cooking slowly won her over. "Mrs. Kim," Beverly said one afternoon while they prepared dinner together, "can I ask you something about Miss Soo-jin?" The older woman's hands stilled on the vegetables she was chopping. "What about her?" "I'd been hearing about her illness, her need for surgery. But I saw her on a video call the other day, and she looked perfectly healthy. Am I missing something?" Mrs. Kim was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I shouldn't tell you this. If Master Jaewon knew. Please. I'm carrying his child. Don't I deserve to know the truth?" Something in the older woman's expression softened. She looked at Beverly's growing belly, then at her face, and seemed to come to a decision. Miss Soo-jin was sick once, several years ago. But she recovered. The surgery she claims to need. I've overheard things. Phone calls. Conversations with people from her family. It's not a surgery she needs, Mrs. Kang. It's an investment. What do you mean? Her family lost everything 5 years ago when their business empire collapsed. She attached herself to Master Jaewon to regain their status, but his grandfather saw through her immediately. The illness, the surgery, it's a story she tells to keep Jaewon loyal to her. To make him feel responsible for saving her. But the money isn't for medical treatment. It's to rebuild her family's criminal enterprise. Beverly felt the world tilt beneath her feet. She's been lying to him this whole time? And using him. Mrs. Kim's voice was heavy with sadness. She's very clever, that one. She knows exactly how to manipulate his emotions. He thinks he's saving the love of his life, but really, he's funding the enemies of his own family. The revelation hit Beverly like a physical blow. All this time, Jaewon had been sacrificing everything, including any chance of real happiness, for a woman who was using him. He had married a stranger, gotten her pregnant, treated her like a transaction, all because he believed he was doing something noble. But he wasn't noble. He was a victim. And Beverly was about to become either his salvation or his destruction. She had a choice to make. She could take this information to Jaewon immediately. Show him the truth about Soo-jin, expose her manipulation, and hope that he would believe her over the woman he had loved for 5 years. Or she could gather more evidence first. Build an airtight case that couldn't be denied. Protect herself and her child from Soo-jin's retaliation. She chose the second option. It took 2 more months. 2 months of carefully cultivated friendships with staff members who had witnessed Soo-jin's true nature. 2 months of quietly accessing financial records that showed suspicious transactions. 2 months of documenting phone calls, tracking meetings, and building a case that would destroy everything Soo-jin had worked for. And throughout it all, something else was happening. Something Beverly hadn't expected. Jae-won was changing. It started small. He began eating dinner with her instead of alone in his study. He asked about her day, her life before Korea, her dreams for the future. He started placing his hand on her growing belly when he thought she wasn't paying attention, his expression soft and wondering in a way that made her heart ache. One night, 5 months into her pregnancy, he came to her bedroom for the first time since she had confirmed the pregnancy. But this time, he didn't come for physical intimacy. He came to talk. I spoke to Soo-jin today, he said, sitting on the edge of her bed. About the surgery arrangements. Beverly's heart rate spiked, but she kept her voice calm. And? She was strange. Evasive. I asked her for the name of her specialist in Switzerland, and she couldn't give me one. I asked to see her latest medical reports, and she said they were with her family's doctor who was traveling. He looked at Beverly with something she had never seen in his eyes before. Vulnerability. Have I been a fool? He asked quietly. It would have been so easy to tell him everything then. To lay out the evidence she had gathered, expose Soo-jin's betrayal, and watch him realize how wrong he had been. But something held her back. Fear, maybe. Or the knowledge that he needed to discover the truth for himself if he was ever going to truly believe it. I think, she said carefully, that you loved someone so much, you stopped asking hard questions. That doesn't make you a fool. It makes you human. He reached out and touched her face, his fingers gentle against her cheek. And what about you? Are you human too? Too human, she admitted. That's always been my problem. He kissed her then. Not like before, not clinical or obligatory, but soft and searching and full of questions neither of them could answer. When he pulled back, his forehead rested against hers, and she felt tears slipping down her cheeks. I'm sorry, he whispered. For everything I've put you through. You deserved better than this. I still do, she said, and felt him flinch. I know. He left her bedroom that night, but something had shifted between them. Something that felt terrifyingly like hope. The truth came out in the worst possible way. Beverly was 7 months pregnant when Soo-jin finally made her move. She had grown impatient with Jae-won's delays, frustrated by his increasing distance, and suspicious of his growing attachment to his supposed temporary wife. So she decided to force his hand. She showed up at the penthouse unannounced. Beverly was alone when the elevator doors opened and Soo-jin walked in like she owned the place. She was even more beautiful in person than she had been on the video call, dressed in designer clothes that screamed wealth and sophistication. Her smile was sharp as she looked at Beverly's pregnant belly. So this is the incubator, she said. I have to admit, I didn't expect Jae-won to choose someone so exotic. And I didn't expect the dying patient to look so healthy, Beverly replied calmly. Funny how that works. Something dangerous flickered in Soo-jin's eyes. You should be careful how you speak to me. After all, once you've served your purpose, I'll be the one deciding what happens to you. Is that a threat? It's a promise. Soo-jin walked closer, her heels clicking against the marble floor. You see, I've worked too hard and too long to get where I am. I'm not going to let some random foreigner ruin everything just because she got pregnant. Everything you've worked for? Beverly stood her ground despite her racing heart. You mean manipulating Jae-won? Faking an illness to steal his money? Using him to rebuild your family's criminal empire? Soo-jin's face went pale. For a moment, her composure cracked, revealing the cold, calculating woman underneath the beautiful facade. Who told you that? Does it matter? The point is, I know everything. About your healthy medical records. About the money you've been funneling to your family's offshore accounts. About your plan to take Jae-won for everything he's worth and then disappear. Sujin laughed, but there was no humor in it. You think he'll believe you over me? I've had 5 years to make him love me. You've had a few months to make him tolerate you. Who do you think he'll choose? Maybe he doesn't have to choose. Maybe he'll see the evidence for himself. What evidence? Beverly reached into her pocket and pulled out a flash drive. Bank records. Phone transcripts. Medical documents proving you've been healthy for years. Everything you've tried so hard to hide. Sujin's expression shifted from contempt to pure rage. She lunged forward, reaching for the flash drive, but Beverly was faster. She stepped back, putting the couch between them. Stay away from me. Give me that drive. Not a chance. They circled each other, predator and prey, until Sujin's composure shattered completely. She grabbed a decorative vase from the side table and hurled it at Beverly's head. Beverly ducked, but the movement threw off her balance. She stumbled, her pregnant belly making her awkward and slow, and felt herself falling. The elevator doors opened at that exact moment. Jae-won saw everything. Sujin's raised hand. Beverly falling. The shattered vase on the floor. And something inside him, something that had been cracking for months, finally broke. Sujin. His roar echoed through the penthouse. He caught Beverly before she hit the ground, his arms wrapping around her protectively, his face twisted with a fury she had never seen before. Jae-won, baby, let me explain, Sujin started, her voice immediately shifting to sweet and plaintive. Explain what? That you just attacked my pregnant wife? That you tried to hurt my child? She's not your wife. She's a tool. A means to an end. You said so yourself. I was wrong. Jae-won's voice was ice. I was wrong about a lot of things. But I'm not wrong about what I just saw. Beverly pressed the flash drive into his hand. Look at this. Look at everything on here. And then decide who's been telling you the truth. He looked at the drive, then at her face, and for the first time since their wedding night, she saw complete trust in his eyes. He looked. He saw. And his entire world came crashing down. The files on the flash drive contained 5 years of deception. Bank transfers to Sujin's family's accounts. Medical records showing she had fully recovered from her illness years ago. Phone recordings of her laughing with her brother about how easy it was to manipulate the kung fool. Text messages planning how to spend the inheritance once she had finally gotten her hands on it. Jae-won read through everything in silence, his expression growing darker with each revelation. Sujin tried to interrupt, to explain, to spin new lies, but he raised his hand and she fell silent. The fear in her eyes was real now. She knew she had lost. When he finally looked up from the tablet, his gaze landed on Sujin with an intensity that made her take a step backward. 5 years, he said quietly. I gave you 5 years of my life. I was willing to give up everything for you. My family's approval. My freedom. My chance at real happiness. And it was all a lie. Jae-won, please. Get out. If you would just listen. Get out. The roar echoed through the penthouse. Sujin flinched, tears streaming down her face, but Jae-won's expression held no sympathy. He had spent 5 years loving a ghost, sacrificing everything for a woman who had never existed. The woman standing before him was a stranger. A con artist. An enemy. If I ever see your face again, he said, his voice deadly calm, I will destroy you. Your family. Everything you have ever touched. Do you understand me? Sujin understood. She fled without another word, her perfect composure shattered beyond repair. And then there were two. Jae-won turned to Beverly, and all the anger in his face dissolved into something she couldn't identify. He crossed the room in 3 strides and fell to his knees before her, his hands reaching for her belly, his forehead pressing against the swell where their child grew. I'm sorry, he whispered. God, I'm so sorry. I was so blind. So stupid. I treated you like you were nothing when you were everything. You and this baby, you're everything. Beverly looked down at the man who had broken her heart 1,000 times, who was now kneeling at her feet with tears streaming down his face, and felt something inside her shift. The anger was still there. The hurt. The months of feeling like a placeholder, a tool, a means to someone else's end. But underneath all of that was something else. Something that had been growing despite her best efforts to stop it. Love. Stupid, foolish, impossible love for a man who had never deserved it but who was finally asking for it. "Get up," she said softly. He looked up at her, his eyes red-rimmed and desperate. "You destroyed me," she continued. "Every day for 8 months, you made me feel worthless. Invisible. Like I was nothing more than a body performing a function. And then you expect me to forgive you because you finally saw the truth?" "No," he said. "I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I'm asking for a chance. A real chance. To show you who I can be when I'm not blinded by someone else's manipulation. To love you the way you should have been loved from the beginning. And if I can't give you that chance? If the damage is too deep?" He closed his eyes, pain etched across his features. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life watching you raise our child from a distance, knowing that I had paradise in my hands and threw it away for a lie." Beverly was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached down and touched his face, her fingers gentle against his tear-stained cheek. "I'm not ready to forgive you," she said. "I don't know if I ever will be. But I'm willing to try. For our child, if nothing else." He pressed a kiss to her palm, reverent and grateful. "That's more than I deserve." "Yes," she agreed. "It is. We're almost at the end, but if you've made it this far, you're officially part of this journey. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and drop a comment telling me what you think Beverly should do. Should she forgive him? Should she take the money and run? Let me know." The last 2 months of Beverly's pregnancy were unlike anything that had come before. J1 became a